Welcome, 7th through 8th grade. I'm excited about our topic this week. This is a big topic. This is the topic of note-taking. Now, this is going to be a 1-week topic and a 1-week assignment, but this is something that in true research, it's a skill that you need, and it is something that will take weeks and months to do in the setting of college or grad school. So if you learn to do it well now, this will serve you all the way through. So what am I talking about? Well, when you do research, you are gathering information and you're collecting it into a place where you can easily access this information. So I'm going to start off with some resources. Now, the good old-fashioned way is with note cards and a pencil. So this is something that, this was the only way to do it when I was your age. But it's still very reliable. A lot of people prefer this. And so you just get yourself a pack of note cards, and I recommend a pencil because you often erase. And this is your means of collecting information. You put one piece of information on each card. And I'll talk about how to organize that information in a second. But for now, that is the number one way to do it. The benefits of doing note cards. There are a couple of benefits. First of all, it allows you to lay out your cards when you have gathered all your information, and you can rearrange them and organize them freehand right in front of you. And if you don't like it, you can take a card from this section and move it to another. So it makes for really easy, tangible organization. Maybe you have a note card that you're like, I just don't need that for my paper. I don't need that information. It's useful, but not for this paper. So you can set it aside and limit your note cards. So that is the major benefit of it. Another major benefit is that it is screen-free, which when you're doing research, you really need to put your head down and concentrate and focus. And when you're able to just have a book or an article and a note card, it allows you to do it screen-free. It's also a neat way to kind of catalog your information. In fact, Marshall, my husband, recently read a book about a man who used a note card system extensively, and he had files and files and files, and that's how he wrote his books. So it's an interesting way of doing it. It's pretty reliable. You don't have to worry about technology, and it's a good way to organize. Now, if you are a techie person and you are looking for some suggestions, some of the top ones that I recommend would be a program called Obsidian. This is one both my husband and my son use. I think my son is using that for his research paper. It's a really interesting way of organizing. Pretty advanced. It's supposed to mimic the human brain. So it's a bunch of networks, kind of. It's a bunch of pieces of information, but you can network it in a way that you see its connections to all the other pieces of information you have. So that's an idea. I do believe all of these are free. Freeform, that's what I'm in right now, this little program. What I like about it is you can type, you can draw, you can import pictures or links. And it does allow you to kind of see the connections between them. I'll zoom out and I'll show you what I mean. So I keep track of my weeks. I keep track of my weeks by putting a big mark, but I can go back and look and see what we've covered in class by zooming out or zooming in. So I can also draw lines between things and do connections. So this is also an interesting one, because it allows you, if you're doing research, you could maybe import an article here or a screenshot of one. You could type things up Now, what I wouldn't like about something like this is it would be hard to shuffle things around and reorganize like you could with note cards. But again, it is beneficial. I think with any kind of technology, you almost have to have a sense of how you're going to organize your information as you put it in, which, to be honest, when you're gathering information, you don't always know how you're going to organize it at the beginning. I know I didn't. So that is one limitation to technology. Although I believe Obsidian gives you a little more freedom. Evernote and OneNote are also both great note-taking apps. So you could have fun with this, explore some new options, or maybe there's one on here that you've used before. Thirdly, you could just use a computer and iPad word processing program, which is just like Microsoft Word, or I believe it's called, what is it called on Apple? Anyway, there's where you just have a blank document and you just type away. So those are all options for you. If you've never done this before, my number one recommendation would be note cards and a pencil, because of how I'm teaching you to organize your information, which is what we're talking about next. So important to remember that the number one tip, the number one thing to keep in mind is you want to gather more information than you think you need. So this might be a funny analogy, but when you make sugar cookies, if you've ever made sugar cookies, you follow the recipe, you create dough, you roll out your dough, and then you go through and you use cookie cutters to cut out your cookies. When you're done, you have all this scrap dough around the edges, which you, of course, can bake and use as scraps, or you can roll together and make some more. But in the end, there is, at least in my experience, no way to make sugar cookies without having some scraps left over. When you gather information, you have to gather more than you think you need. There will be some nuggets of information, some interesting tidbits, even some whole articles or books that in the beginning you gather with your information, but in the end, you don't end up actually putting it in your paper. It doesn't make the cut for your paper, but it still was vital. It's like that cookie dough. You cannot know what to cut out. You won't have a sense of what is important and useful until you actually start writing your paper. So you don't want the cart to get before the horse. You want to gather more than you think you need. It is not your job at this stage to write your paper. It is your job to just gather information widely. If you're already writing your paper at this stage, your paper is going to be biased and it's going to be one-sided. So don't write your paper yet. So here's how you take notes. Number one, always include book or resource information for your future bibliography so you can find it again later. So we haven't talked about the bibliography yet. We're going to talk about it next week. But think about it this way. For every piece of information that you gather, you need to give me, or yourself really, the clues to find it again. So that means you're going to have to include the name of the article or book, the author. If I were you, I would go ahead and just copy down all the publishing information and the page number. Okay? If that's appropriate. Like if it's an article, maybe the paragraph number, and you would do it like this. Publishing info, if you're not familiar with this would be on the title page. If it's a book, and it would be the copyright date. It would include the publishing company, so it could be Houghton Mifflin Harcourt. It's typically on the title page. If you open up the book, I'm doing that right now while I'm talking to you, and I'm just going to read it off. And also the publishing location. So you might write Houghton Mifflin Harcourt Publishers, Inc. And the copyright in this book is 2014. And it doesn't actually give me a city for this one. It does give me another company, Hake Publishing. So I would put all of that right here. Now, if you're accessing a website, then you won't have that information, but you do want to include the web address, www. Whatever it is, even if it's super long. And the important thing with the website is you include the date accessed, because sometimes these things change. Okay? So in other words, the date that you looked at the article. All right, back to our how to take notes. Secondly, the second piece of information you're going to put on this index card, I should do it like this. So you're going to include the source information, which is what we just talked about over here. Then you're going to include a quotation or a summary of the information. So let's say you found a really good quotation, a statistic maybe. You know, they did a poll and it showed that, 80% of blah, blah, blah was successful. Okay, so you're going to put that exact quotation on there. Or you might summarize if you're reading an article and you say, this article is really good. It explains the process of, maybe the article itself explains the process of choosing, I don't know, whatever you're writing about. I always like to talk about video games. Video game 6. Maybe there's an article talking about how to measure video game popularity. Process of measuring. And you think, that's interesting. I might come back to that article. So you summarize it. That would be what you do in the body of this index card right here. So you have the source information, right? And you have the quotation or the summary. And then you want to leave some space at the top for some sort of tag or header so that later when you're organizing, you can label them if you need to. So I might label up here. I might say VG Pop. Video game popularity. Okay? And that I'm still leaving room on the other side because later I might be organizing my outline and moving my cards around. So I might over here later put, point 1A or something like that. So, but of course I can't do that right now because I have not written my outline yet, but I'm gonna leave room for it. Okay, so that is the idea behind your note card. It's going to look something like that, although I hope much, much neater. Now let's move on to talking about our homework for today. So for your homework, it is your job to go and start reading and note-taking. Enjoy this part. This will take you a lot of time, so do not save this for the night before. It will take you a lot of time. It will be much more enjoyable and interesting if you start right away. Maybe aim for 2 note cards a day. Find the books which you already have started to gather last week in your brainstorming, but doesn't mean you have to have all your resources. You might gather resources all the way up to the writing of your paper. So take time, find a couple of resources to start with. Enjoy reading about your topic. Enjoy it. really chew on things and take really good notes. I think one of the best things you can learn to do is always read with a pencil and note cards, or with your application that you're using, Obsidian, OneNote, etc. But learn to really enjoy it and do it thoroughly. That will make this whole process much better for you. You'll write a better paper that way. Next week, I would like you to have 10 note cards or notes, depending on how you're doing it. Not all of them can be from the same source. So I'm fine if you use only 2 sources at this point, but they cannot all be from one single source. That would be a biased paper. And also, I want your notes to look like this. Even if you're taking notes in something like Freeform, like I'm in right now, I want them to look like this, except for I want them to be legible. So maybe type them out if you're using a computer program. If you're writing them out, make sure it's neat enough to go back and reread. So I want 10 of these cards or notes. Now for parents, if you're grading this, and students, this is a 30-point assignment. Why 30? Well, because you're doing 10 cards, but each card has to have these 3 elements. 1, 2, 3. And so if one of your cards is missing one of those elements, it would be 1 point off. So it's a high point assignment. It is in some ways a very big assignment, but it's also very straightforward. So I hope you enjoy this. You will get 100% if you do 10 complete note cards. So take your time, start right away, enjoy your reading. And remember, you cannot get this assignment wrong. It doesn't, even if you read about something and take a note card about, and with information that you end up not using in the end, that's okay. Right now, you're gathering information and you're organizing it in a way that is usable for your future paper. All right, I will see you all next week.